and welcome our viewers in Korea, Ethiopia, the African continent, and all around the world. I'm Moon Gun-young in Seoul. This is Arirang News special live coverage of President Park Geun-hye's address at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. It's a little after 4:30 p.m. here in Korea and 10:30 a.m. in Addis Ababa, and we're roughly minutes away from President Park's address to the African Union, the very first one by a South Korean leader. And we will be bringing you a live feed from the venue as soon as that begins. But to help me better delve into the South Korean president's address to the African Union, its significance and implications, I have here in the studio with me, to my left, Kim Dong-seok, Professor of Foreign Affairs and National Security at Korean National Diplomatic Academy. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
And, of course, to my right, our very own reporter, Connie Kim. Connie, thanks.
Glad to be here.
And we'd like to start our broadcast with these two panelists. Now, but before we delve any further, let's take a look at what the African Union exactly is and what that's all about. And we have a report by our Kim Jung-soo on what the African Union is. So let's take a quick look at that first.
The African Union is the largest coalition in the world in terms of size and population, with 54 member states. Morocco is the only African country excluded from membership. The Union was established in May 2001 and launched in July 2002 in South Africa. It recognizes 4 official languages, and there are estimated to be over 1,000 African dialects. It has a combined population of more than 1 billion people, and a combined GDP of over $2 trillion. The latest member to join the AU was South Sudan in 2011. Africa went through a rapid period of decolonization beginning from 1951. The precursor to the AU, the Organization of African Unity, was founded in 1963. It was launched in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, with 32 signatory governments. The OAU's main purpose was to facilitate coordination with other members to achieve a better life for the African people. Another goal involved eradicating all remaining forms of colonial oppression. The OAU was disbanded on July 2002 by its final chairperson, South Africa President Thabo Mbeki, and replaced by the African Union the same year. Conceived by then Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi as a United States of Africa, the structure of the African Union is loosely modeled after the European Union. Although the members are united under one banner, the Union still has to improve in many ways economically. The AU generates 70% of the strategic minerals business and is an important player in international trade, but 42 currencies in circulation complicate transactions. The AU's future objectives include the creation of a singular customs union, a central bank, and a common currency. The Union is now planning to establish a functioning economic and monetary union by 2023. Kim Jung-soo, Arirang News.
So that was a look at what the African Union is. So Professor Kim, the African Union, it is supposedly really the largest continental, I guess, regional unit or union in the world. And what is the significance and implications of President Park Geun-hye speaking at the African Union headquarters, of course, as the first South Korean leader to do so?
President Park's speech at AU bears importance in that Park's speech will convey 2 important messages to African states. One message is that Korea really cares about Africa. The African Union is recently playing an active role in solving problems faced by African countries such as combating terrorism, ending violence, eradicating poverty, dealing with the climate changes, and so on. So, by delivering a speech and suggest something that help African countries to solve the problems, President Park will send the message that Korea will pay attention, close attention to Africa's problems. So the other message is that Korea respects, admires prominent, great African leaders such as Mandela, Nyerere, and respect and appreciate Africa's history. So OAU, predecessor of AU, was founded by those great African leaders who envisioned the African unity. And Park's speech will be held in Nelson Mandela Hall. As you know, Mandela is an icon of not just Africa, but also around the world. His anti-apartheid struggle was vehemently supported by the African Union.
Right. So I'd like to know, this is not really the first time that a global leader has recognized the importance of Africa. We have seen the United States and China also, among other countries, really pay more attention to Africa and knocking on the African door in recent years. And of course, President Park Geun-hye this time around is making various efforts to tap into the African market and really build stronger relations with the African countries. What is the growing importance of Africa, both strategically and economically, in the 21st century and in 2016 more specifically?
There are many reasons why Africa is important, but I will point out two reasons. One reason is that African countries wield significant influence on the international arena, such as UN General Assembly. As you know, African continent is composed of 54 countries. So it is very essential to rally support from African countries to get our proposal, for instance, on North Korea issues passed. The other importance is economic. Africa has abundant resources, and as the size of the middle class and youth rises, Africa is considered as a growing market. So that's the reason why United States, China, Japan, Russia, or other Britain, or many major countries are investing in Africa and competing for Africa's resources and market.
Now, so we are getting reports that Chairperson Zuma of the African Union Commission has begun her opening remarks, her speech at the venue at the Nelson Mandela Hall at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. So she has begun her address, and it's about 17 to 18 minutes post the scheduled time, so we are expecting a delay there. So what you're seeing on your screen, that is Addis Ababa, the Nelson Mandela Hall at the African Union headquarters in Ethiopia. Now, speaking of which, Connie, we have been getting reports that there are about 1,300 people in the audience attending this historic speech by President Park Geun-hye. Who are we talking about, those 1,300 members?
Right, exactly. About 1,300 officials, like you just mentioned, will be present at the AU African Union headquarters, like you just mentioned, and those include Ethiopian Prime Minister, diplomatic corps in Africa, and representatives of the international organizations. Now, ahead of President Park's speech, the AU Commission head Zuma will be addressing the AU at the headquarters. Before Zuma addressed the AU, she sat down with President Park to discuss various pending issues, such as opening up a communication channel between South Korea and the African Union, and shared views on strengthening bilateral cooperation.
Right, so 1,300 personnel, that's a whole lot of people. But Connie, exactly what are we looking forward to? I mean, in terms of what do we think President Park Geun-hye will focus on in really her introductory speech to the African people as a whole?
Well, as we got some hints prior to yesterday at the summit between Ethiopian Prime Minister and President Park Geun-hye, she's expected to deliver some economic cooperation between the African Union countries, and also give us a message to North Korea in give a message in denuclearizing North Korea, as we know that African countries had close ties with North Korea in the past. And also she's expected to deliver some of the details of the Korea aid that she mentioned yesterday. Probably we will be expecting some of the details that she abstractly mentioned. And also we will be expecting to hear about this Himar movement that she has been emphasizing throughout her past summits to other nations.
Right. So I'm going to go over those 2 points very specifically. Now, Professor Kim, we know that in terms of North Korea ties, so these African countries' ties with North Korea, there are traditional allies like Uganda and Ethiopia, we know, that have been a provider of luxury goods to North Korea. And there are a couple of nations in Africa that still maintain that ties with North Korea. We know that Seoul's Vice Defense Minister is traveling with the president this time around. What kind of cooperation are we expecting from the African countries in terms of South Korea's efforts to denuclearize North Korea?
I think that the Korean government wants to forge military cooperation with African countries like Kenya, Uganda, and Ethiopia. And Ethiopia and Uganda, as you know, have maintained military ties with Korea since the 1970s. So by leveraging economic and military or other incentives, the Korean government persuades these countries to scale down military ties with North Korea and support Korea's attempt to denuclearize North Korea.
Now, the other pillar that we know President Park Geun-hye has been emphasizing, or will be emphasizing, with her talks with the leaders of these African countries, like you said, Connie, is the Korea Aid. Briefly explain to us what this Korea Aid and what this new initiative will try to persuade in the African continent.
Well, President Park's official development aid is dubbed the Korea Aid that she brought to the African country nation. And through this Korea Aid, Korea aims to provide food, medical care, and cultural content to African nations. Now, so basically, there will be mobile health clinics, ambulances will be provided, and health checkups as well as medical supplies and first aid education. Now, just to give you a little bit more background information, Korea Aid will continue until 2017, every month, until when President Park is still in office. So for now, it's a very rosy outlook for now, but we will have to see how that'll be implemented at the African nations.
Sure. So for our viewers, like our Connie Kim said, one very big objective of President Park's visit to the African continent is to promote Korea as a development partner by providing economic assistance. And to support that goal, she is launching a new program called the Korea Aid. So now our Ian Shin explains what this initiative is all about.
During her visit to Africa this week, President Park is unveiling a new government initiative called Korea Aid as part of its official development assistance. Through the program, Korea will provide food, medical care, and cultural content by utilizing specialized vehicles to the 3 African countries the president is visiting on her trip: Ethiopia, Uganda, and Kenya. The goal of the program is to help area residents become self-reliant and to make the services easily accessible to people in need so that, as the slogan says, no one is left behind. In each country, a mobile health clinic and 2 ambulances will offer checkups, medical supplies, and first aid education. Food trucks will offer traditional Korean dishes and snacks. And for entertainment, a truck equipped with a wide screen will display cultural and educational videos. The program will last until 2017, but the opportunities for exchange are expected to continue well beyond that. The Foreign Ministry is expecting the program to expand economic collaboration and cultural exchange between Korea and the related African countries.
When it comes to international relations, Korea specializes in developing cooperation strategy, which is what the United Nations is also working towards, as well as providing humanitarian efforts.
President Park will launch the program in Ethiopia at a special event on Saturday at Addis Ababa University. Yoon Shin, Arirang News.
So that was a look at what the Korea Aid initiative is all about by our Yoon Shin. Now, Connie, going back to the importance of the African Union and African continent as a whole, it makes up 1/4 of the population of the UN members. So explain to us what their importance is in the framework of the United Nations.
Well, exactly. Like you just mentioned, there are 54 nations in the African Union, And that's about 1/4 of the total members consisting the United Nations. And that's why there is growing a voice, there is growing a power within African nations to raise their voice within the international community. And the general consensus is that coming at a time when North Korea's nuclear provocations are becoming a global threat, it's important to get there one united consensus voice in pressing North Korea to denuclearize. So we're getting feeds of that. So the general consensus is that President Park, being the first time for a South Korean president to be addressing the African Union, she is expected to exert some influence over the African nations.
Connie, of course, you are responsible over the defense ministry here in South Korea. You're our correspondent there, as well as the unification ministry. And we know that the vice defense minister is traveling with the president. Have you gotten any word from the South Korean government on what his role will be when traveling with the president to Africa?
Well, as you just mentioned, pushing for denuclearization in North Korea will be one of the key main focuses of President Park's visit to Africa. Looking at some of the 40 MOUs that was signed yesterday with Ethiopian Prime Minister and President Park Geun-hye, defense cooperation was also mentioned. So it's expected that that MOU signed with Ethiopia and South Korea is expected to prevent further cooperation with North Korea. And also, the defense ministry also mentioned that North Korea's denuclearization will be on the agenda when President Park meets with the Uganda president the next day.
Right. So President Park will be making various efforts to really persuade and convince the African Union, and so the African countries and the African continent as a whole to join in on the rest of the world's efforts to really denuclearize North Korea, as well as strengthening economic ties with the African continent so that South Korea can play a bigger role in developing that continent. I'd like to ask you, Professor Kim, why the three countries that South Korean president chose to visit this time around? Of course, she will be addressing the African people as a whole at the AU, but then again, she is making specific visits to Ethiopia, Uganda, and Kenya. And these are three East African countries. Why those three?
I think that one of the main reasons why President Park chose to visit these three countries is that Kenya, Ethiopia, and Uganda's leaders are striving to achieve economic development and trying to emulate Korea's model of development. Ethiopia's economic growth rate exceeds 10%, and Kenya and Uganda records at least 5% of economic development. And all the countries try to industrialize itself and also promote the development of agricultural sectors. And Uganda and Ethiopia are also very interested in Semitic movement. And the second one is Uganda and Ethiopia have maintained military ties with North Korea, and especially Uganda's leader Museveni received support from North Korea when he waged the guerrilla warfare in the early and mid-1980s. So the Ethiopia, Uganda have forged a close tie with North Korea, and by visiting those countries, President Park is persuading those countries to scale down military ties with North Korea and move closer to South Korea, which will exert impact on other African countries' stance toward North Korea.
Right, and we are getting reports from the venue at the Nelson Mandela Hall at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa that President Park Geun-hye has taken the podium, as you can see on the screen. So here's the President of the Republic of Korea.
Honorable Chairperson of the AU Commission, Dr. Zuma, Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Haile Mariam, members of the Diplomatic Corps, and distinguished guests. It is immensely significant to be the first president of the Republic of Korea to visit the African Union, which represents the desire and hopes of the 1 billion people of Africa for peace, reconciliation, and prosperity. In particular, standing here at the Nelson Mandela Hall, I am reminded of the unwavering devotion and commitment to human dignity, equality, and freedom of Madiba. His was a faith that did not despair or give in to great challenges, and Korea is a country that shares the faith of Madiba. 100 years ago, Korea suffered, as did many African countries, under colonial rule. And just 65 years ago, Korea experienced total devastation caused by a war between brethren. And until half a century ago, Korea struggled with hunger and despair. However, the people of Korea continued to dream and did not give up hope, and with unwavering commitment achieved what is called the miracle of the Han. Of course, this was possible with the support of countries around the world. Without the assistance, understanding, and cooperation of the international community, including African countries, these achievements were likely to be impossible or would have been much more difficult to achieve. As Korea has in the past faced great challenges and has experienced overcoming those challenges, I know deep down in my heart the great significance of the passion for hope and growth of Africans bear. So it is a great pleasure for Korea to provide support and assistance to Africa in opening a new future, along with allies that have provided support for Korea in the past. Africa has now embarked on its journey to greatness, a journey to open a new future. An integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa is a goal set by the African continent, outlined in Agenda 2063. This is a blueprint to achieve that dream. Agenda 2063 is in line with the Sustainable Development Goals adopted by global leaders last year at the UN, and it is also in line with the Korean government's goal to achieve global happiness. The vision you have set for yourselves, is one shared by the international community and also an aspiration and dream of the Republic of Korea. Just as Korea, with unwavering willingness and determination, initiated the Semaul movement and achieved economic growth and democracy, I strongly believe that the countries of the African continent will succeed in achieving their goals. In order for Africa to successfully achieve the goals set out under Agenda 2063, a trustworthy partner is necessary, in fact, crucial. Korea, as I mentioned earlier, was able to succeed in its endeavors through the cooperation and understanding of the international community, including African countries. Ethiopia, where the African Union is located, dispatched troops during the Korean War and fought to defend Korea's freedom and democracy. I believe that Korea, which has invaluable experience of the past, can be a partner for Africa in its journey toward the future. Our paths may have been different thus far, but I believe we can share the path toward growth in the future. Korea will build a partnership of cooperation and growth and mutual prosperity by sharing its experience and knowledge. Distinguished guests, For Africa to achieve the Agenda 2063, there are many challenges to overcome. Some come from within the African continent, and others come from outside. In an interconnected world, terrorism, refugee issues, climate change, and disasters. No countries are free. No country is free from these issues. So the issues that Korea faces are issues that Africa faces as well. If we cannot prosper and enjoy peace together, we will not be able to defend our own peace and prosperity. Today, through a new initiative called the Blueprint Toward Comprehensive Cooperation with Africa, I would like to highlight what Korea can do or how Korea can assist Africa in achieving its Agenda 2063. First, Korea, for the past 50 years, has gone through trial and error and has extensive experience in development. First of all, I would like to highlight the importance of education. Madiba once said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. I believe the greatest potential of Africa lies in its people, especially its youths and women. Africa's youths filled with creativity and passion, and the women of Africa, the girls of Africa, fostering their own dreams and ambitions in a healthy environment, will open a new era for Africa. To this end, we will seek a plan to facilitate exchange between 10,000 Africans and Koreans, and this will create jobs for the youth of Africa. Under this plan, in the next 5 years, 6,000 Africans will receive training and education here in Africa or Korea, and Korea will dispatch 4,000 volunteers to Africa. Furthermore, taking advantage of Korea's strength in ICT and science and technology, we will also share our experience in fostering a creative, innovative economy by establishing technology innovation centers in Africa. Also, in line with the Science and Technology Innovation for Better Lives initiative, which I announced in December last year at UNESCO, we will support the fostering of professionals by providing vocational and ICT training. I believe enhancing happiness and capabilities of women is crucial in opening a new future for Africa. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Wangari Maathai of Kenya created jobs and opportunities to learn for women through a tree planting movement. I will also be committed to creating an environment where the women and girls of Africa can stand on their own 2 feet through the Better Life for Girls initiative. In particular, this year, the AU has designated as Human Rights Year with a special focus on women, and we will continue to cooperate in fostering opportunities for education and health services and capabilities for girls. 2 years ago, in response to the Ebola outbreak, Korea dispatched a medical team to Sierra Leone. And in 2009, an initiative to control schistosomiasis was launched. And this was well received by the Sudanese government and the people. And we have successfully completed the first and second phase of the initiative, and currently the third phase is underway. Based on this experience, we will contribute in strengthening health services and disease response in Africa. Also, many African countries are faced with challenges in terms of deforestation, water and food shortage, and climate change. And in responding to these challenges, the Global Climate Fund and the GGGI, which are located in Korea, will join in efforts But above all, we hope to share with African countries the confidence and the will to try to overcome challenges. The Semaul movement, which served as a foundation of modernization of Korea, was not a simple development initiative or movement. It was a movement that awakened the nation, convinced a nation to stand on its own 2 feet. Under the slogan Diligence, Self-Help, Collaboration, people of rural communities took initiative in developing the rural areas, and the government provided incentives. The Semaul initiative or movement began in the rural communities of Korea, and this greatly contributed to Korea's economic growth and development. I can find similarities between the spirit of the Semaul movement and Africa's Ubuntu spirit. Korea will exert efforts so that a customized Semaul movement can contribute to the development and growth of the rural communities of Africa and ultimately all the countries of Africa. Furthermore, we will implement a new type of developmental model, one which the people of Africa can truly relate to. I believe Korea Aid, which will be launched in line with my visit, is a substantive effort to realize this goal of introducing a new type of developmental model. Under this initiative, trucks offering medical service, food, and cultural programs will visit the people of Africa, introducing our respective cultures, and by doing so, connecting the hearts and minds of the people of Korea and Africa. Secondly, Korea seeks to forge a mutually beneficial, future-oriented economic cooperation relation with Africa. Already, Korea has experience in forging economic ties that are mutually beneficial. One Korean electronic company operating in Vietnam creates 20% of Vietnam's total exports at its global facility. This translates to an annual $3.2 billion in exports for Vietnam. This type of success story can be found in East European countries and other Southeast Asian countries. In Africa, many Korean companies have made inroads, creating jobs and transferring technology, ultimately working to build a mutually beneficial economic relationship. If Africa's abundant workforce and natural resources can be married with Korea's technology and capital, I believe this can lead to a significant synergy and contribute to the economic growth of Africa. Recently, mobile money services has been expanding in Africa, and this shows that Africa is moving away from traditional industries. Korea has great strengths in many new growth industries such as ICT, medical, environment, and science and technology. If we can join forces with the creative talent of Africa, I truly believe we can open together a new era of renaissance on the African continent. Accompanying me on this visit are many Korean companies that are slated to hold business forums and one-on-one meetings. I hope this creates a wave of cooperation that will spread across Africa. Thirdly, Korea will join efforts of the international community to establish sustainable peace and stability on the African continent. Korea is faced with a security threat due to the situation on the peninsula. And so we know more than anybody else the importance of economic growth in ensuring peace and stability. In 1993, Korea dispatched its peacekeeping forces to Somalia, and currently around 290 military engineers are dispatched in the south of Sahara Angola, and South Sudan. Last September, I attended the summit on peacekeeping operations held on the sidelines of the General Assembly of the UN, and there I announced plans to establish Level 2 medical treatment facilities through the African Union. Currently, we are in talks with the African Union and the UN to locate this medical facility in Mali. We will also increase our contributions to the African Union Peace Fund. Furthermore, we will continue to cooperate in Africa's response to pirates and also expand peacekeeping forces on the African continent as well. Apart from the traditional forms of security threats such as conflict and war, new forms of threats, including terrorism and extremism, are undermining peace and sustainable development around the world. No country is free from the threat of terrorism, so we need to join forces in responding to terrorism. A global response is necessary. In responding to terrorism and extremism, I believe that Korea and Africa can strengthen their cooperation by sharing information. Currently, Korea is faced with a grave security threat that arises from North Korea's pursuit of nuclear weapons. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank African countries for their support in condemning provocations by North Korea. Africa has signed the Africa Nuclear Free Zone Treaty, and I ask for your cooperation in convincing North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons. Lastly, in order to strengthen our cooperation with African countries, we will continue to build and expand our existing institutions that connect Korea and Africa. Thus far, the Korea-Africa Forum, where the foreign ministers of the two regions meet, has served as a forum for communication and trust. And the fourth Korea-Africa Forum will be held in Addis Ababa, and we look forward to fruitful results. On the 25th, Korea was decided as the host country of the 2018 General Assembly of the African Development Bank. We will hold the Ministerial Conference on Africa-Korea Economic Cooperation, which is held every 2 years, and further strengthen our economic ties. Furthermore, we plan to establish a policy council for Africa, the African Union and Korea, and we hope that this new institution will strengthen our cooperation and mutual understanding. Also, in Korea, within Korea, there are efforts undergoing right now to strengthen the institutional base for cooperation. For instance, in 2013, the Africa New Era Forum was established in Korea's National Assembly, and representatives take the opportunity there to talk and discuss issues related to Africa. Furthermore, the Korea-Africa Center was launched last year under the support of the government, and we are facilitating and strengthening exchange not only in politics and also the economy, but also in culture and academia. We hope that these institutions will serve as a strong bridge toward peace and prosperity in the future. Distinguished guests, the world is undergoing great transformation. As the saying goes, global is local and local is global. This shows that globalization and localization is deeply interconnected these days, so sharing and cooperation is of utmost importance. I hope that Korea can join Africa in its journey toward the future. And even if it takes time, I believe that if we go together, we will be able to achieve our joint dream of peace, prosperity, and integration. In this process, while we are on this journey with Africa, we will stay true to the spirit of mutual benefit. We will share the pains and dreams of Africa, and most of all, we will listen to the voices of Africa. Ethiopian poet laureate Chegaye Gavre Medine proposed that Africa become a tree of life for the global community. Korea will be Africa's partner in transforming the continent into a tree of life. As a trusted friend, I propose that you join us in your journey toward the future. Thank you.
So that was South Korean President Park Geun-hye's address to the African Union, the first time that a South Korean leader has made a special speech at the African Union headquarters. And what you're seeing right now in your screen is President Park Geun-hye. They're wrapping up her special speech. Now, she did end her speech saying that let's go hand in hand in their Africa's journey towards the future. And she did mention or focus on three very big portions. First, she said that South Korea will share its experience of development and education with Africa. Secondly, of course, a future-oriented economic ties between South Korea and Africa. And third, security issues regarding, of course, North Korea's nuclear threat, but as well as terrorism-related threats in Africa, and that South Korea will join in hands in battling that out. Now, Connie, let's go over in detail a brief summary of President Park's speech to the African Union.
Well, first of all, she emphasized Agenda 2063. Now, she said that the Agenda 63 is a blueprint for achieving Africa's dream, and this is also in line with the Sustainable Development Goals set by the UN member nations last year. And so in order to achieve that Agenda 2063, she mentioned 3 points in order to speed up that process. Now, the first one was education. Now, she said she sees biggest growth potential in the African people, especially in young adults and women. So specifically, she vowed to exchange 10,000 young adults in efforts to boost employment in Africa. And she also offered 6,000 Africans Korean education in South Korea for the next 5 years. And she also offered education opportunities in the ICT sector, where she said that she will set a technology innovation center in Africa to share South Korea's creative innovation experiences. Now, the healthcare industry was not out of the focus. She vowed to contribute to responding to epidemics and strengthen its healthcare infrastructure. Now, the second point she emphasized as to achieving the Agenda 2063 was pursuing future-oriented economic development, which is one of the main key factors for President Park's visit to the African nations. Now, she mentioned economic success stories of East Europe and Southeast Asian nations in South Korea and encouraged more business opportunities between South Korea and the African nation companies between the two countries. And she also emphasized Africa can open its renaissance when Africa's talents combined with the ICT sector, medical industry, and the environment industry in South Korea. Now, last but not least, as you briefly mentioned before, security issues were brought up, specifically nuclear issues. Now, President Park mentioned the experience of Africa signing of the Nuclear Weapon Zone-Free Treaty. Now, this message is sure to pressure North Korea to denuclearize, as we mentioned about the close military ties between African nations and North Korea. So she specifically urged North Korea's ally to help in the denuclearization process with Pyongyang.
Right, so this was a very long speech, a very comprehensive one, a very big blueprint, I would say, and touching upon various sectors and even giving the impression of really taking the South Korea, and Africa's bilateral relations to a whole new level. Now, Professor Kim, let's go over the President Park's first point of sharing Korea's experience with Africa in terms of development as well as education. Of course, we know that President Park Geun-hye has been a very avid, I suppose, leader in in supporting African youth, especially girls. And she did mention in her UN speech late last year about her role in the supporting the African Girls Get Education movement. Tell us what this portion of her speech signifies.
What is noticeable in this part of speech is that Korea will share development experience with African countries. It is not just export Korean model of development, but consider Africa's needs and help African countries to localize the Korean model of development and adapt it to achieve economic development. What is impressive to me is that President Park declares that Korea will reach out to people who have been marginalized, such as women, girls, and youth, and others, through Korea Aid. So Korean government will help to improve well-being of these people by helping African countries to combat disease, boosting education, and helping those girls and youth.
Right. So, President Park, what you're saying is that what is noteworthy is the fact that the South Korean president said or offered a model, a customized model for Africa. So, a fit model for Africa that is, I suppose, a variation of Korea's Taeman-Undong movement, which is the development model of rural villages. Of course, by doing so, the South Korean president is offering something to Africa that Africa will not be able to reject, and by doing so, have the African countries weigh out the pros and cons of forging closer relations with South Korea or North Korea in that sense. Now, let's move over to this future-oriented economic partnership with Africa. In this part, we know that there is a huge business delegation traveling with the president to Africa. What are we expecting on that front?
I think that by visiting Ethiopia, Uganda, and Kenya, Korean government will have the opportunity to expand economic opportunities in those countries. So there are large size of economic delegations visiting those three countries with President Park, so which means that Korean government will support private companies' investment in African countries and encourage more Korean companies to advance to African countries.
Sure, of course. And President Park really did say that when Africa's really abundant workforce and natural resources are married with Korea's high-tech and advanced technology, it will really create a bonanza even in terms of the African economy booming and as for the Korean economies or companies to boom as well. Last but not least, security issues. She did not leave out the North Korea issue. Of course, I'm sure she had in mind those countries that have close relations with North Korea, traditional allies even. She said that South Korea will work with the international community in establishing a sustainable, safe, and secure African continent, but at the same time sought for the African support in condemning North Korea for its provocations and helping and joining in international efforts to denuclearize North Korea. Was that noteworthy or impressive on your part?
President Park's speech holds that Korea is concerned about security issues in Africa. Some African countries have been plagued or ravaged by civil war, terrorism, extremist violence, and piracy. Park's speech, President Park declares that Korea will help those African countries suffering from those security problems to solve these problems and to achieve more safer and more peaceful Africa. And I think that it is important for President Park to convey a message to African leaders that nuclear North Korea will jeopardize not just security of East Asia, but also security of Africa. And in the 1990s and I think early 2000s, Africa has an experience of denuclearization. Before the collapse of apartheid regime, South Africa had possessed nuclear weapons but renounced them before Nelson Mandela took power, and Libya's Muammar Gaddafi proclaimed the renunciation of nuclear weapons. So Africa has experience of denuclearization. So I think South Korean government think that by telling African countries about the danger of nuclear North Korea, Korean government expect that African countries have a denuclearization experience will sympathize with South Korea's position.
Of course. And as the president really pointed that out, that Africa has signed a nuclear-free zone in the past, and that this threat of a nuclear North Korea, is a threat not only to South Korea, East Asia, but also to Africa and the entire world as a whole. Well, I think that just about wraps up the president's speech at the African Union, and also a wrap of this live coverage of President Park's address to the Union, the first ever by a South Korean president at the African Union. I'd like to thank Kim Dong-sai, Professor of National Security and Foreign Affairs at the Korean National Diplomatic Academy, for joining us. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And of course, our Connie Kim for staying throughout the coverage with me. Thanks, Connie. And of course, all of our viewers for staying with us throughout. We have a team covering President Park's visit to Africa, so we will keep you updated on the latest of that trip, as well as an analysis of South Korean President's speech at the African Union throughout the evening on Arirang News, and, of course, a news center at 10 p.m. Korea time. So until then, bye-bye for now.